How Lubbock has changed and what the difference has meant to those who live here. In my project, I want to explore how the city of Lubbock has changed over the years and specifically how the change has affected people differently. In order to achieve this, I've asked several people the same order of questions to see how their answers would contrast. To the older individuals I talked to, the change was much more significant, but to the younger people, not so much. Although the age at which change has occurred, each individual I talked to mentioned at least one way that their life or preferences has changed over the years. In order to keep authenticity, I promise to keep the responses anonymous. Where are you originally from? The 16 individuals I questioned about are all either currently living in Lubbock or have lived in Lubbock for a majority of their life. But of course, that does not mean that they have lived there their whole life. So I decided to start my conversation with each individual with the basic question of where they were from. What I found was actually shocking. 55% of the individuals were born and raised in Lubbock, which was not too crazy because I knew for the most part people from Lubbock stay in Lubbock. But the other 45% came from other cities in Texas, but nobody I talked to were from outside the state. This conclude that within the city, an overwhelming majority of people who live here are probably native Texans. How did you end up in Lubbock, or why did you move to Lubbock? My second question, I wanted to focus more on how each individual ended up in Lubbock. For many of those individuals I asked, their response was that their families were from here, or that they moved for work, but here are the responses I found the most interesting. First, college, moved away and came back for my husband to start his medical practice. My dad accepted a professor job at Texas Tech. I was born in Lubbock, but spent much of my life going back and forth to Austin since my daddy was in the state government. I went to Tech and fell in love with the city. I could never accept leaving after graduation. How has living in Lubbock impacted your life? I wanted to see from individuals I talked to how their time in Lubbock had impacted their lives. This was mostly to get on a more emotional level for the responses that were to follow. The responses I found most interesting were, it has given me an appreciation for small town friendliness while providing me with the resources I needed to excel in whatever I please. In so many ways, lifelong friendships, sense of home, able to be around parents, and the kids able to spend time with their grandparents. The community has supported our family. The schools and the values have been a very positive influence on our children being raised here. Lubbock is such a safe bubble with a stable economy. There are few highs and lows with stable growth, which makes it a very positive environment. What was Lubbock like when you first moved here / when you were younger? This was the first question where there was a significant contrast in age. Answers from individuals 25 and younger were, nothing past 82nd Street, glory days of Mike Leach brought the town together like never before. Pretty similar to now, however, I lived on the south side of town, so it is pretty impressive seeing how much it has grown out that way, as well as the west side of town. I remember Milwaukee Avenue having very little things on it or around it, and now it is more of the more developed parts of town. Answers 26 and older. Growing up in the 50s was such a happy and simple time. One could walk to school, ride your bicycle anywhere / anytime. There seemed to be very little crime, and everyone I knew went to church. Small town feel, Indiana was 2 lanes, and 50th Street was a dirt road. What was your favorite place to eat when you were younger? This question is to further the difference between the older and younger generation to see how their eating habits differ. Answers of individuals 25 and younger. Caprock Cafe, Pancake House, and Blue Sky. Answers of individuals 26 and older. Chez Suzette, Aztec Inn, Catman's, Char King, Tuttle House, and Burrito King. When you were younger, what was a popular place for people to get together? I find that leisure has a significant impact of how one lives in the city, so I wanted to see how it compared to each individual. Individuals 25 and younger. Young Life, J&B Coffee, and Friday night football games at Lowry, Rush Pool, and the mall. Individuals 26 and older. High school age and younger was friends' houses, church, and the village swinger where all the big bands played. Char King Drive-In, and Skate Ranch for junior high, and South Plains Mall. These answers truly show how much time has changed for separate individuals because many of these places the older generation mentioned aren't even in business today. Do you believe that Lubbock was a closer community when you were younger? From the individuals I asked, 47 of them believe that Lubbock was in fact a closer community when they were younger, than it is now, but 53% believe that it is about the same. This is another example of how, for those of an older generation, the town of Lubbock was smaller and more isolated, but to those who are younger, it has grown to be a larger city with a social scene significantly different than that of an older generation. What is a major change in Lubbock that you have witnessed that has impacted your life? This question mostly came out of my own curiosity because of my own experience that I have learned that most Lubbockites have witnessed at least one change that has affected their lives. This is because obviously the town has changed over generation with the growth of the university, but also has grown economically significant of recent. This allowed for some major changes to take place over the past 15 years. Here are some responses I found most interesting. Market Street on 19th, in place of trashy apartments, lowered the crime rate in my parents' parallel neighborhood. The growth of Texas Tech with the medical school and law school, Lubbock has become an important medical center for the entire region. Population growth, sadly, a demise of public schools. Where do you spend your time now? I wanted to have a series of questions that directly contrasted the ones I asked earlier to see how individuals' preferences changed over time. Many of the older individuals I asked responded simply with home or local restaurants, while almost all of the younger individuals I asked primarily said school or work. But a large majority claimed that they spend a significant amount of their week at Texas Tech sporting events. It is good to know that the Red Raider spirit is alive and well in West Texas. What is your favorite place to eat? I decided to also repeat the restaurant question because I think it is a great question to show how Lubbock has changed. With the older generation, the West Table was the most popular restaurant. The West Table is a high-scale modern restaurant that is located in downtown Lubbock. Amongst the younger generation, Chuy's was the resounding favorite, with almost 40% of the individuals under 25 claiming it is their favorite spot to eat. This was shocking to be seeing, as though it is a chain Mexican restaurant, and I am more of a Rose's guy myself. What is a business that closed that you wish was still open? Responses to this question was all over the place, so I decided to highlight two responses. 50-Yard Line. The 50-Yard Line was a cheap steakhouse that was in Lubbock and had served the community for several decades. It was seen as a kind of tech staple because it was decorated head to toe with tech memorabilia that you could not find anywhere else. Margaret's. This was a fashion clothing store that was open for 50 years that shut down recently because it could not compete with online shopping and competition from other stores. What change have you seen that you dislike the most? I presented the individuals with a question in order to give them the opportunity to just flat out say what they dislike about the changes to the city. Here are some responses I found interesting. Emphasis on wealth over hard work. I've noticed a lot of farmers and landowners selling their properties. It's understandable, however, concerning at the same time with how we're going to keep contributing to the agricultural production in the U.S. Developments far away past 82nd or 98th Street. The old lady in the house next to me just died, left behind about 35 cats. Just sad they're all homeless now. This was my personal favorite response of all interviews I did. What change have you seen in Lubbock that you like the most? Like the question before, I wanted to give the individuals an opportunity to flat out say what they like about the changes to the city. Commitment to the community and growth of Texas Tech. Downtown revitalization, the Buddy Holly Hall. I kind of like the bigger city feel, but not too big. New stores, grocery stores, South Lubbock expansion. More independent restaurants. And access to the finest medical care. In conclusion, I learned that the people of Lubbock value many different things and that their lives have changed throughout the decades. But I also found that the things that have made Lubbock attractive to those who come here is still very much alive, and Lubbock will continue to change for the better as long as pride for the city remains.